The world shimmered. It pulsed with an unseen energy. Amelia felt it first as a tingle down her spine, then as a rush of heat behind her eyes. When the world settled, it was different, sharper, hers. It began subtly. A wilting flower revived with a touch. An old photograph, its edges softened, the faces within made youthful by her gaze. Then came the understanding. She could manipulate age. Turn back the clock or wind it forward with a thought. Her boyfriend, Mark, sprawled on the couch, provided the perfect subject. He was, to put it mildly, frustratingly stagnant, content to exist in a haze of video games and takeout. A playful thought struck Amelia. What if she turned back time? Just a little. Mark, darling, she purred, her eyes gleaming with a mischievous light. Mark, engrossed in his game, grunted a non-committal response. Amelia, her fingertips buzzing with energy, focused her will on him. It began subtly, a softening of the lines around his eyes, a return of the spring in his step. He was like a worn photograph, the colors of his youth slowly being restored. At first, Mark was oblivious. He preened under Amelia's newfound attentiveness, mistaking the spark in her eyes for affection, not the thrill of the experiment. He welcomed her playful teasing, attributing his sudden energy to a new workout routine. But the changes were escalating, becoming impossible to ignore. His clothes felt snug. His voice, once deep and resonant, now wavered with an adolescent crackle. "Amelia," Mark finally asked, his brow furrowed in confusion, "is it just me, or do I look younger?" Amelia laughed, a delicious tinkling sound. "Younger? Don't be silly, darling. You look fantastic." Denial morphed into panic as Mark caught his reflection. Gone was the man in his late 20s, replaced by a gangly teenager staring back with wide, fearful eyes. His pleas for her to stop, to change him back, were brushed aside. "Don't be such a baby," Amelia chided, her voice laced with a newfound authority. She reveled in his helplessness, his dependence. The power thrummed within her, intoxicating. Mark, now a petulant preteen, raged against his predicament. He yelled! He cried. He threw himself on the floor in a fit of frustrated tears. His anger, once a formidable force, was now the temper tantrum of a child, easily ignored, easily dismissed. Amelia, however, had grown bored with his outbursts. With a sigh of exasperation, she decided to try a different tactic. A firm hand on his head, a silent command, and Mark was shrinking again. Smaller, younger, until he was nothing more than a toddler, his cries reduced to incoherent babble. He crawled on the floor, a constant gurgling reminder of her power. He was no longer a source of frustration, but a plaything. She dressed him in ridiculous outfits, cooed at his nonsensical babble, and delighted in his absolute reliance on her. "Who's in control now, Mark?" she whispered, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. The apartment, once filled with the clutter of their shared life, was now her domain. His video games gathered dust. His clothes lay forgotten. He was a living doll, molded to her whims. There were moments, fleeting and quickly suppressed, when a flicker of guilt sparked within Amelia. The sight of his tear-filled eyes, the echo of his desperate pleas, tugged at her conscience. But the allure of power, the intoxicating taste of control, was too strong to resist. She had become the architect of his existence, the sole arbiter of his fate, and she found, with a chilling sense of satisfaction, that she enjoyed it. One day, gazing down at the infant Mark gurgling happily in his crib, a wave of unease washed over Amelia. This wasn't the man she fell in love with. This helpless creature, utterly dependent on her, was a stranger. His mind regressed, or he had a mental breakdown. It mattered not to her. She only smiled down at the innocent baby, the ghost of Mark's laughter, a distant echo. The world outside her apartment beckoned. The city, teeming with life, felt like an open playground. She could alter destinies with a touch, rewrite narratives with a glance. Politicians became toddlers, their ambitions crumbling like sandcastles. Tyrants aged into oblivion, their reigns of terror ending with a sigh. With each manipulation, the memory of Mark faded further, replaced by the intoxicating rush of her godlike power. Was she a monster? A savior? The line blurred with every passing day. And what of the infant Mark, cooing softly in his crib, blissfully unaware of his stolen adulthood? Would she keep him as a pet, a reminder of her power, or would he become another casualty in her quest to reshape the world in her image? As Amelia stepped out into the night, leaving him with a babysitter for the evening, the city lights reflecting in her cold, calculating eyes, the answer remained elusive. But one thing was certain. The woman who once toyed with age was gone, replaced by something far more formidable and far more terrifying. The world was hers to mold, and she was just getting started.